Hello, everyone, and welcome to our 14.8 Ops section retrospective. Today is March 7. I'm Michelle Torres, and we are going to be hosting our retrospective on the things that happened in the last milestone. If you want to see the recording, then please go to the recording of the summary for the what went well, what went wrong, and what can we improve. In this discussion, we are going to go through some topics that we were having open from our last retrospective, areas of improvement that each team was proposing, and then we're going to go through one of the discussion topics. So to start, we have Michelle on the experiment on MR label hygiene. And the update is we do have some dashboards that are enable us to measure the MRs with word type label. And package team is running an experiment with a bot that is reminding engineers to label their issues. I'm expecting to share the numbers and the change after the bot in the next retrospective. And then we have verify pipeline. We're proposing in the last retrospective to design discussions in separate issues instead of from the implementation. Do you want to verbalize how that is going?
I can verbalize, and then Sam, feel free to add in any details that I miss, which is likely. So recently, the team started breakout design issues and discussions just in general, and separating out those issues between design, back end, and front end. One of the examples I placed in there is one of our epics that we've been working on in pipeline authoring, which kind of illustrates and shows how the issues are being organized and separated out from a design front end and back end perspective. And then we've also adopted, which we'll talk about in a minute, the implementation table, which kind of illustrates that and kind of organizes kind of where we're at in that process, just to make sure that nothing falls through the cracks. And then as a follow-up test, we also have updated our handbook and kind of updated the verbiage around how we're splitting up those issues so that everyone can understand our processes as well.
Nice. Will be interesting to see more details later to replicate in other teams. Thank you. So we have now, I lost on the agenda. Who is next now? Monitor? Who wants to verbalize for monitor? The idea was different behavior to escalate manual incidents.
I can verbalize for Crystal.
Thank you.
The escalating manually created incidents is ready to ship in 14.9. The project took longer than expected due to fluctuations in team capacity, as well as more complexity than originally planned. There was so much collaboration in the team to complete this work, including backend engineers working on a significant portion of the front end code. Feedback from the team about successes in working together, pairing, and code reviews has been excellent.
Excellent. And next one from Verify Pipeline Insights. The idea was to forward-facing planning issues with milestone themes. Who wants to verbalize that one?
Yeah, I can verbalize. We have implemented this, and it's been helping keep our team on track for the most important work we are scheduled to complete each milestone.
So this is like putting themes on the template of your milestone planning or something like that?
Right. Yeah.
Nice. It will be good if you share an example so that teams can take a look.
Yeah.
From there.
Yeah, I can link. I can add a link to our planning issues.
Thank you. So the idea of this section is all these actions were coming from our previous retrospective on what can we improve. So the idea of having this discussion is to see how other teams are learning and try to learn from those to replicate on other teams if it's useful. So thank you everyone for sharing. On the discussion topics, I added a topic and we didn't have votes, so let's go with that one. I was wondering if we are measuring in any way our diversity, inclusion, and belonging value. We normally have our what went well, what went wrong, how can we improve on these retrospectives by values, and I'm not seeing any on that value on any of the topics. So I was curious, like, how their teams are seeing it. Do you think this is something that we should start taking a look? And this is an open mic.
I think a good thing to do here is take a look at the competencies in the handbook. You know, I think even when we look at certain aspects of the diversity, inclusion, and belonging values description, it could be really helpful to take a look at what we're actually talking about by taking a look at the handbook. I don't want to get too specific, but I think in some examples where we have coaching and mentoring, where we have working towards asynchronous from a geographic diversity perspective, but also, you know, we could look at the way people are communicating within a milestone on the work they're delivering, whether they're, say, updating a planning issue or something like that. We could look at contributions. I know that, for example, some team members have contributed to the college course. I forget the exact name of it. I apologize, that Dava was leading. People have contributed to that, but there's not necessarily, I don't know if that jumps to the front of people's minds when they're taking a look at it. And I think this particular milestone and the retrospectives we've had for this milestone have been a little bit affected by, you know, world events that maybe we don't want to get into too much, but I know people are relatively affected by this. I know I am more than I might have thought I would be, but it's certainly been kind of a little bit stressful. And I don't even live in that part of the world, so I can't imagine how that feels to other folks. So yeah, I'll stop there.
I think you're bringing an interesting topic, because if I read from all the things that we have on our retrospectives, we normally focus on what we are delivering for the product, how the team is working, and I'm pretty sure all the teams have examples on this part about supporting people in different time zones, on collaborating in areas, like all the examples that you're mentioning. We are just not voicing them, and I think it will be very important that we start thinking about them when we are filling the doc.
Yeah, that's a great point, Michelle. You know, one of the intentions of structuring this by values is so that we, highlight great examples of us living our values, and that's the way we further our values in the first place. So, you know, Dan's point that reviewing the values and the sub-values, you know, there are probably, just if you were to read that right before you were to write this document, you would think, oh yeah, this was a great example of that value being lived out at GitLab by this specific team member. But sometimes I think in particular, the DIB value subcomponents are a little bit harder to recognize in a moment when you're thinking about, like, what did we deliver? How did the team work together? So maybe, I don't know how the doc is structured right now, but maybe just adding that reminder, like, remember to go through these sub-values when thinking about whether to put your highlights down.
I think a quick improvement can be put a link to the handbook values on the document. So when we are collecting all the summary, we just read it before. I don't know how other managers feel, like changing the individual retrospectives to do it by values can be an option, but I think probably can be also more heavy there.
Oh, that's a good point. So the individual group retrospectives aren't divided by values, but this one is. Okay, so that is probably a big component of the disconnect if we're thinking through the individual ones.
Yeah. Sorry, Nicole, that we continue talking and we are not going to your point. Can you?
Apologies, Nicole. Yeah.
No worries. I just wanted to link this issue here that I saw recently, where a lot of great ideas were thrown out for ways to not only implement this quarterly goal of ours, but also some measurable actions, such as maybe make X number of meetings in a rotation for different time zones, using a UTC plus offset when discussing times, etc. So I wanted to share that.
Yeah, I think part of what we can be looking at here is, as a team, we're all trying to make sure we're actually adding thoughts and feedback into these retrospectives, because it's a good way to learn. And so I would sort of encourage everyone on the team, regardless of whatever role you have in the team, but particularly managers, when you're actually looking at your retro, if you're not seeing feedback, then maybe that's an opportunity to ask folks about why they're not adding feedback there, and see if there's some sort of general thought process about certain aspects, whether that's diversity, inclusion, belonging or not. I don't, it's important that this value is pretty valuable, of course. We wouldn't have it as a value otherwise, but in general, you want to be looking, I think, at the retrospectives and trying to make sure that you're getting feedback. And if you're not, maybe that's feedback in itself to go chat with people about, perhaps in one-on-ones or as a team meeting or whatever makes sense.
Does anyone have any other topic that you want to talk on this retrospective on how it went? Any other discussion that you want to have? Like, we didn't vote on the issue, but this is an opportunity that I'm opening right now for everyone to.
So I may be opening a can of worms here, but I thought I'd maybe just ask the question to the group. Recently, I've been putting a lot of focus towards looking at just the overall performance of the team, workload, how much we can take on, with a lot of discussion, at least within pipeline authoring, around iteration cadences and looking at how we can be, executing on things and getting things done in a fairly efficient manner. I started thinking about, as it relates to the say-do ratios within the teams, and I'm curious from other teams' perspectives how they've been managing that, or how they've been able to assess, what is the optimal number of effort that each team can take on while still being able to move forward. So curious, as an open question, how other teams are doing it too.
I will ask you, like, I don't have an answer, but I will ask you, how are you measuring right now? Like, how are you making that numbers on how much can you do?
Yeah, so from our perspective, on a per milestone basis, we look at what we're committing to, and then treating it as, when it's complete, is when it has that workflow production label attached to it. And so when I look at milestones where we've had higher completions of or higher say-do ratios, we've looked at what the number breakdown has been, on a per team member basis, and saying, okay, that milestone went really well. This milestone maybe wasn't as high, and looking at and comparing what those numbers look like. Again, it's not certainly very elaborate or detailed. It's just looking at to see if there's trends that we can see over time that say, okay, this is, as we do more of this, this is, an ideal number. Obviously, there's a lot of variables in play, with either rapid actions, EAs, different weights on things that maybe turn out to be a lot more of an effort than maybe what they originally thought they would be. So there's a lot of things that could affect that, but that's some of the things that we've looked at.
So you're measuring through, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, cuteness break there, Order, thank you. Yeah, so I was going to ask Mark, you mentioned say-do a couple of times. Say-do is a really good measure, I think, for looking at, what we're committing to and how much of that we're delivering. But, in theory, you could look at a say-do and go, well, we got 100% because we only committed to doing two or three things, right? So if we have really low expectations around what we're delivering, and also, how we measure that, you can have a really awesome say-do, which is why something for a team like MR rate is really valuable, because you want to from my view anyway, I want to think about like competing metrics that are sort of in tension a little bit. And so I would say, you know, one of the things is taking a look, like you said, at what we're completing over time across milestones, and then sort of seeing, you know, when we produced a lot, what did that look like? One of the other things that I think might be helpful there as well is the average weight of issues that are being completed as well. And sort of looking at that and going, okay, well, this one we didn't do so well. And like you said, there's a heap of variables, of course, but like taking a look sort of holistically at what's going on, mean time to merge, you know, or, you know, review to merge time at least. You know, there's a heap of factors there to be thinking about as contributions, but I would say that one of the key aspects is the numbers are helpful, but and can be like really, really critical in terms of like looking at sort of that aspect of performance, but talking with team members and asking them, hey, how did this one go? You know, like what went well in this milestone, which is why we do these retrospectives, of course. So you can be like, hey, we had so many things going on. It was really hard to get through and know what to prioritize. Or we did this awesome job in security, but I know we had this other area that we didn't do because of that, and we needed to adjust the priorities accordingly. And so I think getting that holistic picture and identifying which metrics there have been, you know, valuable in determining how that went, but still like making sure we're chatting with the team. To come back to your original question, I would sort of say looking at Say-Do, like I said, is really great. I'm a big fan of Say-Do. I think it's a sort of multivariate type metric that we have. And so attributing that around and sort of going, well, how many items did we actually complete out of this list? Is this a good number of things? Did we make significant progress? What is progress? What is progress towards? And so that's kind of my thoughts on it. I'll stop talking.
Yeah, I would agree with Dan, and I think one thing that Dan mentioned that's really important is that these, whatever performance indicator we use for development or product or the quality team, if you have a assigned SET or design, it's really important that the whole kind of quad share an understanding of what those are and be a part of the retrospective to ensure that they're helping each function achieve their performance indicators. So make sure that's my expectation, and we have it in the kind of like career development framework for product managers, that contribution to development success metrics is a key performance indicator for product. In the case of MR rate, that's very much focused on iteration. Maybe it's slightly different for Say-Do, but just making sure that your whole quad has an understanding of each function's performance indicators really helps you ensure that the whole of the group is involved in moving them rather than just specific functions.
I remember we were having a topic on sharing how other teams are doing retrospectives. And the first thing that came to my mind with this topic is probably we want to provide more information about how much we achieve in the milestones, so that can kick off conversations around individual retrospectives. So you mentioned like you normally take a look at the Say-Do ratios, and I'm assuming after that you review the weight, as Dan was mentioning, like the weight of that milestone that went very well. So probably having those metrics on the individual retrospective issues that we have can kick off the conversation to have the team talking about what really worked well to deliver so much or so low.
Yeah, to Dan's point too, looking at on a per milestone basis, having the context around numbers and not just being so consumed with looking at the percentages of 100%, because there were several ones, at least within pipeline authoring, where we had different team members that were distributed to other initiatives. And so the numbers may look high, you know, and say, oh, you know, it's 100%, but, you know, the amount that we completed was maybe 2 or 3 issues just because we didn't have as many team members to be able to work on specific pipeline authoring work. So I think keeping that in mind and, you know, and knowing that context is helpful as you look to the overall picture and data trends.
So not wanting to put any action to anyone, but if any manager here wants to improve their retrospectives, to think about it, and if someone wants to put an experiment on it, so we can talk again on the next retrospective on how we are measuring this one, we can put it as a improvement or process that we want to measure for next retrospective. Great. Let's go to what are the improvements that we want to track for our next release. And we're going to start with pipeline authoring.
Great. So recently the team started to trial using a Kanban style approach with being able to what I call grab and go from our board and our ready for development. The biggest thing that we're trying to achieve or try to understand better about in these improvements is answering the question, what is next? So obviously we have planning issues and we have focus that we should be working on, but those evolve and change over the course of a milestone. And so looking at how we can maybe unblock and allow team members to be able to grab stuff that they know is at the top of the list and be able to move forward is something that we're looking at and seeing if that's helping. Initial feedback so far seems to be positive, but again, we're still evaluating this, and so we'll maybe something for us to track into the next release as well. And I got the next one too, Michelle, so I'll just keep going. As it relates to streamlining. So one of the things that we're trying to do as a team is try to have better organization and uniformity around our issue creations. And so when we have ad hoc requests that come up, trying to have everyone has different ways of how they organize their issues when they create them. So we're exploring having a template in place that will allow us to capture those details. Within that template, we also have that implementation table that we talked about. That is optional. It's just something that's noteworthy that if it applies to the issues that's being created, it gives some structure around that. So that's also something that we're also evaluating and see if that's improving our consistency as well.
I'm curious on this one. Do you use the labels for weighting back-end work and front-end work?
Say more, Michelle.
So one thing that my team does is we have different labels to estimate the weight, one for backend and one for frontend, so that can help us on the planning, and it's just the labels.
Yeah, so this template, or you're speaking to the template itself, it was more about the content that was going into it. Sometimes it said problems, sometimes it said proposals, sometimes it said solutions, sometimes it said a implementation table. So there wasn't a lot of consistency, which sometimes made it a challenge to see if we were capturing all of the required data. And so having this template provided, in addition to some of the labeling that helped, and that was generic labeling, I think is in the template, to give some structure so that the team felt they had some consistency and what to expect when these ad hoc requests would come through.
Cool. Thanks, Mark. Yeah, I just added a note just based on the pre-conversation before we got recording here, but I think it probably makes sense to have a co-host in this meeting so that we can live stream. There's a chat going on about this. I'm not sure if this is super valuable to be also live streamed, but Kenny, if you want to share, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was just actually I was crafting the MR right now to the template so that when it says like add this to the calendar, it also says add other co-hosts. So I'll share that. But I think it's a great point and a quick add.
And I think I'm going to add on sorry, I jumped the other comments to share the answer. We should use just one link for all the retrospectives instead of creating one for each one that is each person that is hosting. This is a new link. Nico, do you want to verbalize?
Nothing. It was just about the fact that the meeting is created doc and what the other says. We should have one.
So with that, we have our topics for the retrospective. Thank you, everyone. We are over time, but before going out, I would like to have someone that volunteered to host our next retrospective. Should I pick someone? I want to avoid what happened last milestone, that we didn't have anyone hosting. So if we don't have a volunteer, I'm going to go very bad here and select someone. Good. I will pick someone and I'm going to share on the Slack because I'm going to do a random, obviously. Thank you, everyone, and have a nice day.
Thanks, Michelle.